On the afternoon of November 24th, 1971, just one day before Thanksgiving, a man boarded a commercial airplane in Portland, Oregon. He wore a dark suit, a black overcoat, a narrow tie, and dark sunglasses. He looked like a businessman. He was polite, calm, unremarkable in every way. But within minutes of takeoff, that man would hand a note to the flight attendant claiming he had a bomb. He would go on to hijack the plane, demand a ransom of $200,000 in cash, and eventually leap out of the rear staircase in midair, parachuting into a stormy night over the forests of the Pacific Northwest. The man vanished. No one on the ground saw him land. No body was ever found. And despite one of the largest manhunts in FBI history, his identity remains a mystery to this day. This is the story of D.B. Cooper, the only unsolved case of air piracy in American history, and one of the most enduring and puzzling disappearances of the 20th century. Welcome to Unsolved Cases 24. Today we're taking to the skies with a man who pulled off one of the boldest and strangest heists in modern history. At 2 p.m. on November 24th, 1971, a man walked up to the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter at Portland International Airport. He paid $20 in cash for a one-way ticket on Flight 305, a short 30-minute trip north to Seattle, Washington. He gave the name Dan Cooper. He boarded the plane, a Boeing 727, with 36 other passengers. He sat in seat 18C near the rear of the cabin, lit a cigarette, and ordered a bourbon and soda. According to the flight crew, he was calm and polite. He wore a business suit, carried a black briefcase, and appeared to be in his mid-40s. Shortly after takeoff, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. At first, she assumed it was just another man handing her a phone number, so she tucked the note into her purse without reading it. Cooper leaned closer and whispered to her, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." Startled, she opened the note. Typed in all capital letters, it read, "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I will use it if necessary. I want you to sit next to me. You are being hijacked." Florence complied. Cooper opened his briefcase just enough to show her what appeared to be 8 red cylinders connected to wires and a large battery. Whether or not it was real remains unknown to this day. He then made his demands: $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck ready in Seattle to refuel the plane for a getaway flight. The crew relayed the demands to air traffic control, who passed it on to the FBI. The response was swift. The airline authorized payment, and the FBI began assembling the ransom and parachutes. Meanwhile, Cooper appeared calm and collected. He made small talk with the crew, even ordered another bourbon, and paid his drink tab, telling the stewardess to keep the change. As Flight 305 circled Puget Sound to give authorities time to meet his demands, Cooper seemed entirely in control of the situation. He had allowed all the passengers to remain unaware of what was happening. At no point did he shout or behave erratically. He didn't threaten the other passengers, and he showed no aggression toward the flight crew. In fact, several of the flight attendants later described him as oddly polite, even courteous. While the plane held its pattern in the air, authorities on the ground were scrambling to gather the requested items. The ransom money was put together using mostly $20 bills, totaling $200,000, and photographed in advance to record the serial numbers. The parachutes were acquired from a local skydiving school and an Air Force base. At 5:39 p.m., nearly 3 hours after takeoff, the plane landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport under heavy security. By then, it was dark and raining. Cooper instructed the pilots to taxi the aircraft to a remote, well-lit area of the tarmac. He told the crew to close all the window shades in the cabin to prevent snipers from getting a clean shot. Once the money and parachutes were delivered to the rear stairway, Cooper allowed all 36 passengers and 2 flight attendants to leave the plane safely. Only the pilot, co-pilot, one flight engineer, and one remaining stewardess stayed on board. The next phase of his plan was about to begin. With the hostages released and the ransom secured, Cooper issued his next set of instructions. He directed the pilots to fly the plane to Mexico City. He wanted them to maintain a low altitude of 10,000 feet, keep the landing gear deployed, and fly with the cabin unpressurized. He also ordered the rear staircase to be lowered once the plane was airborne. The crew pushed back, pointing out that the aircraft couldn't make it all the way to Mexico on a single tank of fuel, especially under the unusual flight conditions Cooper had demanded. A compromise was reached. They would first stop to refuel in Reno, Nevada. After just 7:40 p.m., Flight 305 took off once again, this time with only 5 people on board and a hijacker with $200,000 in cash tied to his body. It was a moonless night. Rain fell steadily and the winds were strong. Approximately 30 minutes into the flight crew felt a sudden shift in cabin pressure. A warning light indicated that the rear staircase had been deployed. They asked Cooper through the intercom if he needed assistance, but received no response. What they didn't know was that D.B. Cooper had already made his move. He had opened the rear stairs mid-flight and leapt into the freezing darkness, somewhere over the vast, forested wilderness near the Lewis River in southwestern Washington. The pilots landed safely in Reno shortly after 10 p.m. FBI agents and local police swarmed the aircraft, but Cooper was gone. All that remained was an open staircase and an empty seat. Within hours, one of the most intense manhunts in American history was underway. The FBI launched what would become known as NORJAC, the Northwest Hijacking Investigation. Dozens of agents were dispatched to the suspected drop zone, and search teams combed through the dense forests, rivers, and farmland in southern Washington. Military helicopters, planes, and hundreds of volunteers scoured the terrain. They searched for weeks, but found nothing. No parachute, no body, no trace of the money. It was as if D.B. Cooper had simply vanished into the night. The FBI interviewed everyone on the plane and compiled a detailed description. Cooper was described as a white male, around 5'10" to 6 feet, between 40 and 50 years old, with an olive complexion and a calm, authoritative demeanor. He wore a black suit, a narrow black tie with a mother-of-pearl tie clip, and carried a briefcase and a paper bag that may have held part of the ransom gear. Despite hundreds of leads and tips pouring in over the following months, none led to a confirmed identity. The name Dan Cooper was quickly discovered to be fake, and a media error that misreported the alias as D.B. Cooper ended up sticking permanently in the public imagination. Cooper had become a legend. As the case went cold, the FBI continued to follow up on leads for years. They examined suspects with military or skydiving backgrounds. They tested theories involving airline employees, engineers, and even disgruntled veterans. Yet nothing stuck. In 1980, nearly a decade after the hijacking, a surprising discovery briefly reignited interest in the case. An 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was digging in the sand along the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington, when he unearthed a rotting package wrapped in rubber bands. Inside was $5,800 in $20 bills. The serial numbers matched the ransom money given to Cooper in 1971. It was the first physical evidence ever found from the hijacking, but it didn't bring investigators any closer to the truth. The money had clearly been buried or deposited by the river at some point, but Cooper's body was not found nearby. No parachute, clothing, or gear was discovered in the surrounding area. If Cooper had survived, why would he leave money behind? And if he had died, why wasn't anything else recovered? Some investigators began to believe that Cooper had not survived the jump at all. The weather was terrible, the terrain was dangerous, and he was jumping with a non-steerable military parachute while wearing a business suit and dress shoes. It seemed suicidal, and yet no trace of a body has ever surfaced. Over the decades, the FBI compiled a list of over 800 suspects. Most were eventually ruled out. but a handful of names have remained at the center of debate. One of the most discussed suspects was Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Army veteran and skydiving enthusiast who hijacked a plane in 1972, less than 5 months after Cooper's heist. McCoy used a similar method, demanded a ransom, and parachuted out mid-flight. However, the differences in appearance and behavior between the two men led the FBI to rule him out. McCoy was later killed in a shootout with the FBI after escaping from prison. Another suspect was Dwayne Weber, who confessed to his wife on his deathbed in 1995 that he was D.B. Cooper. He had a criminal record and had spent time in prison. His wife claimed he had nightmares about jumping from planes and had once visited the Columbia River area where the ransom money was later found. However, the FBI found no concrete evidence linking him to the hijacking. More recently, researchers have looked at individuals such as Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam veteran with explosives training and a checkered past, and Sheridan Peterson, a former Boeing employee and experienced skydiver. But again, no DNA evidence or conclusive proof has ever tied any of them to the case. By 2016, after 45 years of investigation, the FBI officially closed the case, stating that it had redirected resources to more pressing investigations. Still, they left the door open for credible new information. D.B. Cooper is more than just an unsolved mystery. He has become an icon, an outlaw anti-hero who beat the system and vanished without a trace. His case has inspired books, documentaries, movies, and even songs. Every year, new amateur sleuths, historians, and adventurers attempt to crack the case, scouring the flight path, analyzing the currency, and profiling potential suspects. In truth, no one knows for certain whether Cooper survived that jump. If he did, he managed to live in complete anonymity for decades, never spending the money in a way that would attract attention. If he died, he managed to leave behind one of the greatest unsolved disappearances in modern history. The questions remain. Who was he? How did he vanish? Now has no one in over 50 years managed to definitively prove what happened to D.B. Cooper. In the end, the man who calmly ordered a bourbon and soda, politely handed over a ransom note, and disappeared into a stormy night sky has secured his place in legend. And unless something dramatic changes, the truth may never be known. Thank you for watching Unsolved Cases 24. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications for more unsolved mysteries, legendary crimes, and stories that continue to haunt history.